Hey everyone, this is Natural Freedom League. I am John Wydogen and we are at naturalfreedomleague.com. Here once again with my producer and co-host, Chill Will Keller.
Hey, what's going on, brother? How you doing?
What's up, Will? How
Doing
are
good.
you? I'm doing good.
Yeah, doing real good, man. For sure.
Yeah, I love doing these interviews, and we've got a new guest from where are you from again, Chad?
Yeah, southeastern Indiana.
Southeastern Indiana. This is Chad Hargrove, and he has a page on Facebook called Be Forgiveness, and he covers natural law topics and connects it with a focus on the process of forgiveness. He has a somewhat of a mission statement on his page or that he shared with us. I'm going to read that. Helping people gain a deeper understanding of forgiveness and the importance of its role as a tool for mental, emotional, and spiritual freedom. I definitely know I can apply this process to my life. I'm definitely interested in learning more about what you have going, Chad. So, tell us about your gnosis of forgiveness.
So yeah, just a little bit of background about myself. I'm 34 years old. I'm a father to my daughter Sienna. I've got a stepdaughter, Jade. Both of them are 9 years old. I'm a partner to my life partner, Amberly. I'm also a allopathically trained medical doctor. Um, I freedom advocate, a ganjapreneur. I have had a cannabis farm out in Oregon for about 3 years. Well, since about 2016. Um, I'm also a mental and emotional wellness consultant and a aspiring children's book author and podcast host. So, regarding my gnosis of forgiveness, I never felt like until I really had that moment of gnosis, I never felt like trauma or um, you know uh, conditional love or things that caused me pain and suffering throughout my lifetime. I never felt like I really held on to those things, especially the like trauma that could have been confusing or I didn't know how to interpret as a child, and or trauma that can be more subtle, such as conditional love, wherein you're only feeling like you're loved and accepted if you're meeting a list of criteria for the people you look up to in life. We don't normally think of that as trauma, but that is a form of trauma. We, even if we're not seeing someone get blown up or some terrible catastrophic event, having love kind of withheld from us, it is a form of trauma. Unless having love withheld, and unless we're meeting these certain list of criteria. So I didn't feel like I held on to those things, but I definitely did. And I think that we all do to an extent, whether we're consciously aware of it or if it's just whether it's just or lingering down in the subconscious, kind of driving our surface behaviors. So I think we all to an extent hold on to the different traumas that we have. And our parents weren't given the tools, the psychological tools to deal with and process those things. And neither were we. Our society is filled with people that including myself, that didn't know or don't know how to heal and process from the events that they go through, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So my gnosis of forgiveness really came in probably mid 2014. I had graduated medical school in 2013 August and started my pediatrics residency at Southern Illinois University. And had the house picked out, got our couches and furniture, all had the house all furnished and everything. My wife at the time and I had a 18-month-old daughter. And during my first week of pediatrics residency, which is, residency is the most difficult time in any physician's career. It's like 110 hours a week, low pay, really going from being a student to actively assessing and taking ownership in the care of patients. And I got a phone call basically and said, I'm divorcing you. I'm not moving out, 300 miles from Cincinnati to Springfield, and your daughter's going to stay with me. So, at that time, that was the most traumatic thing I've ever been through in my life. I've had plenty of hardships and this and that, but, you know, uh, being told that my marriage was over, my daughter, I didn't have custody of my daughter, my lawyers, family, friends, everyone telling me just to basically get over it. You're not going to win this battle, in court and things like that, was the deepest depression and the throes of despair ensued for the next, weeks to months. I was, so much so that I had removed my guns from my house, took them to my parents, and kind of, gifted them to my parents, because I was just in such a bad place. I didn't know what was going to happen. So just really traumatic event for me. It took everything I had to perform in residency and be there for my patients. And also when I was suffering so emotionally and mentally sick. And basically on the floor, face down, covered in my tears, with my dog by my side, just hanging out, trying to comfort me. It just hit me like a ton of bricks, almost like a download, like I got zapped with something. And it just said, because I was being so hateful, filled with so much rage and resentment, verbally abusing my ex-wife. My daughter at 2 years old was witnessing her mom on the phone, in tears, at my hands, And so I was harming myself, I was harming my daughter, and I was harming my ex-wife, with the hatred I was holding on to, and things that were beyond my control. I can't control the thoughts, emotions, or actions of another person. So it hit me like a ton of bricks in the throes of despair that if you can stop this, you can stop causing this harm to yourself and to your ex-wife and to your daughter if you simply forgive. Understand that whatever the reasons behind her decision or that decision came from a place of her own fear and her own struggles and her own unhealed issues, and just like I have my own. And I did, I did. I want to say it took everything I had, but after I got that realization or that epiphany, it wasn't as hard. I simply did. I forgave her. I recognized her as an imperfect human, just like I was. And I forgave her, and I just watched everything around me change. I watched my relationship with her change. We became thoughtful and conscious co-parents of our beautiful daughter. And I saw my daughter, my daughter's relationship with her mother heal, and her relationship with me heal. Even though she was so young, you could see all the beautiful manifestations of that free will choice I made to forgive. So once I did that deed of forgiveness, it kind of spilled over to all other aspects of my life. Professional relationships, interpersonal relationships with friends. My mother, after about 2 years of pediatrics residency, I left to pursue more integrative approaches and get some education in integrative medicine, because I was, among other things, I was just tired of having drugs and surgery as my only options to care for patients. I felt like I was in violation of my oath and in violation of, who I am. So went home after about 2 years, and synchronistically at that time, I spent 12 months at that time with my mother, engaging in deep conversation, talking about forgiveness, really working through some of our hardships and some of our things that we had gone through. Plant medicine helped in those conversations and those offerings of forgiveness. And, I spent my mother died 12 months later after I came home. So being able to spend that time with her and heal that relationship before she passed, I just can't say enough about it. Just another reassurance to me of the tremendous healing power and evolutionary potential of the proper application of forgiveness. So after that happened and mom passed, we had me and my father and some other people invested in a cannabis farm in Oregon. I spent a long time going back and forth between there and trying to run the farm from far away. Took everything I had, because I'm not really a businessman or a farmer. But I really had to get this message out. I spent so much time one-on-one advising and counseling friends that, really felt profound help and impact from the conversations we had around this topic. And and then I began teaching workshops, going to different music and art and healing and consciousness festivals, and holding workshops on forgiveness, and trying to give people just bring. Everybody knows forgiveness can help things. Everyone has this baseline understanding that forgiveness is a good thing. But a lot of us in the daily hustle and bustle of life, it just, that thought lies beneath the surface and it doesn't come up to our waking consciousness often enough, I think. So I kind of made a goal to go around and just remind people like, hey, you've got this tool at your disposal. You've got this power to forgive and decrease your suffering and increase your mental and emotional freedom and sever the ties, sever the emotional ties from the negative things you've been through. And that frees up a lot of your mental and emotional energy to create what you want in life. So that's kind of the overview of my gnosis of forgiveness and how it came to me through my darkest hour.
Man, yeah, that's phenomenal. I can relate on many experiences in my life, and it takes that kind of that darkness, those life events, to all of a sudden shift your attention inwards. And that's not always the case. People can do that without that darkness if they have the knowledge and the care to do that. But me dealing with drug addiction, it took me to literally go into a psychosis of hell, my own personal hell, to actually look at myself and start questioning myself and my behavior. And that's what the shadow work is. It's bringing conscious awareness to the unconscious, and bringing light to dark, and the power of forgiveness. I think people have they kind of brush forgiveness off, like, oh, I forgive you, and it's not accepting someone's bad behavior, like the patterns that they're going to keep for just keep doing to you. It's it's deeper than that, and it's more powerful, and it's definitely a process. So that's a phenomenal story, man.
All right, thank you so much. Yeah, it truly is it's a deep, a profound, and heartfelt deed. You have to offer forgiveness with your being, with your soul, and with your heart, not just say, I forgive you, and like try to convince yourself that you actually forgave someone. And the very same goes for ourselves. I think that most of the work needs to be with forgiving ourselves for our shortcomings and the times that we've messed up. Thanks be that I've fucked up a million times, and I got a million more times that I will too, and I'll have more lessons to take. And gaining that compassion for yourself and being able to forgive yourself really helps you gain it for other people. So yeah, it really is it's a process. There's not really anything that you'll just forgive one time and say, oh, I'm done with it, I'm over it, I'm completely healed. It's like a spiral staircase. The rest of your life, you'll be able to revisit and forgive certain aspects of events, and each time you're taking away more lessons from those events.
Definitely. Yeah. That's something that I have utilized, is revisiting experiences that I had early on in life and kind of replaying them in my head with now this older, more mature consciousness, awareness, and then, dissecting it, situations in the past, and then, analyzing it and healing it from there. So that's cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I definitely relate to a lot of your experiences. Actually, the first thing you said about when you were coming up as a youngster, you didn't really feel like you didn't have you didn't feel wronged, and I think I'm kind of like that too in my life. I'm pretty optimistic, and I don't let things get to me too much, and forgiveness came easy as a youth, but then you get older and you start having these other experiences, and I went through a divorce as well. And even with your friends, you have different experiences where you have to have that acceptance and then move on from it and continue to have a relationship with that person, and let things go. The words that come to mind to me, or the word that comes to mind, is transmutation, right? It's like taking that negative thing and transmuting it. Forgiveness is a huge part of that. Absolutely. And the other thing I like about what you're talking about is the separation of forgiveness from religion, right? Like it's not connected to, we think of forgiveness so much in a Christian perspective in America. To hear forgiveness being talked about just for the sake of forgiveness is really important.
Right. Yeah, and that's the beautiful thing about it, because I've been able to connect with the most atheistic of people, and the most fundamentalist religious of people through this topic, because it transcends all of that. The deed of forgiveness came before any man-made construct, you know, or the ability to forgive transcends all of that. You know, it's a notion that churches and religions talk about, but we need not involve those systems, those man-made systems, to gain freedom from it, you know. And that's been great. And that's why, you know, I talk about the gnosis of it. I didn't read it in a book. I mean, sure, I've heard forgiveness mentioned, and they talked about it in the churches that I went to as a kid and stuff. But at that time, when I needed it the most, I didn't read any book. I didn't listen to no self-help books. No one told me to forgive, nothing like that. It was gnosis and coming into knowledge through direct life experience. And I don't believe anything about forgiveness. I know it like I know my own name, that if you practice it properly, and not this new age fluffy variant of it where we just forgive ourselves deeper into bondage, but if you practice it properly, it will increase your freedom. It might not end all suffering for you or anyone else, but it's absolutely going to help you. So that's the gnosis I speak of there, you know.
Yeah, you know, it's the ego, you know, is always it always wants to promote separation. You know, it's kind of like what religions do in these institutions, right? They want to be the middleman between you and God's spirit, nature. So, and the ego always wants to protect itself and promote that separation. So ultimately, what you're doing is detaching from the egoic attachment onto these experiences that want to clutch and hold on. And that's why it's important. That's why it's a huge part of the shadow work and you know, your conscious evolution.
Absolutely. Nobody hates the word forgiveness more than the human ego.
Right.
And because we identify with these pains and these traumas, and by God, they hurt us, and I'll be damned if I'm going to let anyone do it again, or I'm going to let anything hurt me again. So we walk around with our defense mechanism up, and that's where, you know, having an ego is good, but the ego having you is not. And that's when when we are in that fear-based polarity, then the ego has us, and it's in the driver's seat, and that's what we want to undo.
Yeah.
So why is forgiveness important for the freedom movement?
So, you know, this is no secret to any of us, and as Passio and many others have said, there's nothing new under the sun, and no, you know, before we go on, I want to preface it by, like, you know, I'm no master at forgiveness. I just happen to have this experience, and I happen to have the words to put it into perspective for people, and I'll be practicing it the rest of my life and probably never perfect it. It's important for the freedom movement, because, you know, currently and for thousands of years, people have hated each other enough. You know, there's been the divide and conquer strategies and the dialectics put in place by the dominators of this world have worked flawlessly, and we have no problem hating each other, and that's been going on since time immemorial, and we can continue to do that, but we're going to repeat the experience, or continue the experience, or repeat the experience we've been having for thousands of years. So the inability or the unwillingness to properly apply forgiveness as a part of our mental practice or spiritual practice or whatever, will keep us creating individually and collectively from the fear polarity, from the generative polarity of fear. And we don't heal, and we don't undo our conditioning through hatred of ourselves. Our self-loathing is never going to lead to our evolution individually or as a collective. So likewise, our neighbors aren't going to heal from us hating them. You know, we can't undo anyone's conditioning for them, and we can't heal anyone for them, but we make it much more difficult when we continue to hang on to hatred and resentment for our neighbor and for ourselves. So the generative polarity of fear is what creates disorder, chaos, and slavery. whether we're talking about enslavement to our own ego or enslavement to the will of a small group of psychopaths on this planet. Creating from the fear polarity is going to continue and propagate that collective experience. So, and our actions based on that hatred and resentment are going to continue to give us the same results we've been getting as long as we've been hating each other. So, in short, bringing the practices of forgiveness to the surface of our awareness and giving them more careful consideration and nuanced consideration in our daily lives is going to push us from the fear polarity to the love polarity. That's where we create from, fear or love. Those are our generative polarities. So the more we're able to practice responsible forgiveness, the more we're going to, raise our vibration individually and as a society. As we all know, love, agape, true care, this is the ordering force and the evolutionary force of creation. So as long as we're unwilling to forgive and to really truly want what's best for everybody and want the healing for everyone, we're not gonna have what we say we want. So an approach where we're not forgiving ourselves or others into moral or ethical complacency, we're not being complacent with our bad deeds or the misdeeds of others. I believe that's the key to true evolution, learning to forgive while holding ourselves and our neighbors accountable, and being able to speak without speaking hatefully and like really, trying to punish or harm somebody else. So basically, moving more towards a love polarity to create is where freedom comes from,
Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, it's dominion of self, right? As we think, so we feel, and so we act. Being in that fear-based consciousness, it's almost out of order, right? Or thinking's out the window. It's just feeling, then acting. And a lot of times situations are being manipulated, mean that, the society or just a certain group of people are being polarized just to get reaction instead of action.
Right.
So, stepping into the power of forgiveness and moral responsibility, and ultimately, instead of self-loathing, it's self-respect, right? To look at again and take responsibility for yourself. And you start with your thoughts, and then that will align your emotions, and then you can align your behavior from there and actually take action. When you're in a fear-based consciousness, you're just reacting nonstop. It's just a perpetual cycle. It keeps feeding itself, and that operates on the aggregate, on a large group of individuals as well.
Survival mode. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was thinking about how back in the day when I was like learning conspiracies and getting deeper into it, and my parents would be like worried about me, like it's gonna drive you crazy. But if you're not coming from a position of fear, you're more just looking for the truth no matter what you find, and like with our last episode with Passio, it's like you might hate that predator class, and you might take action against them at some level, and that scares your parents, right? But anyway, point being is just like, if you're not coming from a place of fear, then you're looking at it more clearly, and you're able to kind of think like, well, why are they doing these things, right? And it made me think of when Bush was president. I had the thought that if you were George Bush, if you had his life, would you have done anything different? Right. It's like, it's an interesting thing to think about, right? Like I'm John Wydogen, middle class Bay Area, kid who I see what George Bush does and I think that's evil. It's ultimate evil. But what if I was George Bush? So it's like, I kind of realized we kind of have to forgive those people on a certain level.
Sure.
Depending on how it plays out, it's sort of like as above, so below. It's like integrating that evil part of you and understanding why why humanity had to go through this violence and this war. And it's something we have to deal with. It's something we all internally have to deal with,
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. I think so too. Being able to see from somebody else's perspective, basically understanding the human ego and the suffering and fear that it's kind of built upon, and the deception that it's built upon, lets us look at everyone that, as we're standing on common ground. There's things that drive, poor behaviors, and we've all experienced that before.
Yeah. Is that kind of what you mean by egoic discernment?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. That's exactly what I mean. Like, for me, the first or most important step in taking a step towards forgiveness, or because I've gotten to a point now where I don't necessarily, I mean, of course, more deeper and trauma and severe suffering and things that I go through obviously are processes of forgiveness, but little trivial things like managing my expectations, or someone, annoying me, or falling short on the small things that are easier to forgive. It's not even second nature. It's my first nature now to be forgiving, and to not concern myself or overly worry about, trivial things. Now, of course, my patience can get tried in different situations, but yeah, the first and most important step to me is discerning what actions, what thoughts, emotions, and actions that I have come from my ego, and which ones come from my heart, which ones are the real me, and which ones are my false identity, which ones are because of the lies I've believed, which ones are because of the times I've felt bad, or the times I've hurt that I didn't recover from. Discerning those two things, really giving it some thought, and saying, understanding and accepting the human ego as the tool that it is, but knowing that it's not who I am. It's not all that I am. It's just a part of me that'll be with me as long as I'm a human. Allows me to set my ego in the passenger seat, and ensure that my heart has the wheel at all times, or as often as I can. So my ego, and the fear that I've been conditioned with, and the attachments that my ego clings to, and the lies and the deceptions that my ego has believed that I've thought who I am for so long, that is the reason that I've ever been an asshole to somebody. That is the reason that I've ever done something, morally wrong, or something, ever actually committed a wrongdoing against somebody. My heart never wants to do that. My soul does not want to initiate harm, or say something mean for the sake of it, or whatever. Any of the countless things we've done in our lives that we look back on and say, man, that wasn't really me. I didn't mean that. I shouldn't have done that, or I shouldn't have said that. That was my ego. It was not my heart. It was not my soul. It was not who I really am. So developing an understanding that, an understanding of that, and discerning my egoic behaviors from my true heart-based behaviors, that is the most important thing. Is I can zoom out and look at it and say, well, that's the same reason that they were a jerk to me. And that's the same reason that they did, no matter how terrible it was, even if it was the worst wrongdoing you can think of, or it was just someone calling me a name, it came from that place. It didn't come from a place of love. It didn't come from a place of who that person truly was. It came from their fear-based, indoctrinated, wounded ego that they didn't know how to recover from. They didn't have the tools to heal from or process, and that their egos in the passenger seat, or in the driver's seat, just like mine has been before. So that's a really, it like you said, it lets you look at it more objectively. It takes the emotion out of it, and saying, I'm not perfect, and neither are they. I've messed up. I've been a jerk, and so have they. Even if it's a really terrible thing, coming to see that, be able to forgive what has transpired, because I'm powerless to change what already has happened, and being able to look at it objectively and think about solutions. What am I going to do right now and in the future to stop that wrongdoing? How am I going to correct that action within myself, or help the other person do that, or whatever it may be. But it lets us, egoic discernment allows us to see the common ground that we all stand on, which is suffering, self-inflicted, but often self-inflicted suffering that we didn't quite know how to recover from, or how to heal from. but suffering in general is a common factor of the human experience. And to one degree or another, some of us heal better from it, some of us process it better, or this aspect better or that aspect better. But it's still the egoic discernment to me is the most important part in my forgiveness process, when it comes to forgiving myself and others.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, suffering is the best teacher, right? It's like we incarnate in this existence ultimately for what? Well, it's pretty much a school. It's a school to learn what morality is and to lower entropy, right?
Yep.
So suffering goes hand in hand with that. That's why life is suffering, and it's all about learning from that suffering. And it's not to say too that with the power of forgiveness that you just accept immoral behavior, the wrongdoings.
Exactly.
I would say that what you're doing is you're not attaching to that and holding that within and taking that on.
Right.
You're recognizing it, and you're transmuting that energy either to some kind of solution or just some internal resolvedness.
Yeah, and some evolution or some higher understanding. Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
A big part of it too is, when we were talking about these moments we had through our lives where we had to face this, this reality of forgiving and letting go, that a big part of that for me was talking to my friends about what was going on, and like going through this period of just like banging your head against a wall, and like, so it's like, it's good to talk about it in this way and try to give people some wisdom about it so they don't have to go through that, or it can help them when they do have those moments, because we all have to go through it.
Sure.
But yeah, that awareness of it, because a lot of that process is just time and understand, like you said, Gnosis,
Right.
seeing like, what am I doing? This is like, having these text wars at work.
Yeah, right.
Like I had to like put that away, man. Like it was just taking up so much of my energy.
Oh, it's so hard too, trying to communicate to family and friends about the state of the world. And, I mean, how many times do you have to get rejected, or they just don't want to hear it? Their forgiveness comes into play there too, because that can really piss you off.
Yep.
And put you in a really dark place. So kind of understanding that, do what you can for your actions and how you can communicate and be the example, instead of putting you in a pissy mentality and having resentment and taking on that anger.
Absolutely, because
So,
that only makes us a less effective communicator. Being able
exactly.
to forgive them despite their unwillingness, or someone's ignorance, or someone's nescience or unwillingness to take information or whatever. Letting the anger consume us really decreases our ability to transmit the message.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
It's really
exactly.
important.
So tell us what forgiveness is not and does not require.
So I know you all are familiar with the apophatic process of arriving to what something is by describing what it is not.
Yeah.
So I'll try to shortly run or briefly run through these and kind of say, give you what a lot of times what the ego wants to convince us that forgiveness is. Forgiveness is not apathy. It is not lack of caring. Um, it is also not complacency. It is not saying that, oh, I forgive myself for this thing that I want to change, but I'm not going to change it because I forgive myself. That's the new age variant of forgiveness. The deceptive variant can have us do that. Everything's perfect. I'm exactly perfect the way I am. There's nothing I need to work on. I'm completely forgiven, and so is everybody else. Their behaviors are perfect, and I can accept that. That's not what forgiveness is. It's not complacency. Forgiveness is not letting someone off the hook. It's not endorsing the wrongdoing that they did or endorsing the behavior that they did. Forgiveness does not invalidate the pain or the suffering, the pain felt or the suffering that you endured from an experience. It does not invalidate the pain or suffering that you caused to someone else. If we're talking about forgiving ourselves, it doesn't invalidate that pain. Forgiveness is not for them. If we're talking about forgiving someone else, you're not doing it for them. If they benefit from your forgiveness, fantastic. If it benefits them in some way, then great. But you're doing it for you. So forgiveness is not for them. And this is right here is probably the only thing that I slightly disagree with Mark Passio on. Out of all the information that he's ever had, forgiveness does not require the other person to be sorry, and it does not require the other person to even know that they did something wrong or even perceive that they did something wrong. And now I want to distinguish forgiveness from reconciliation. I believe to reconcile a situation or for true reconciliation to take place, that someone has to admit that what they did was a wrongdoing and commit themselves to rectifying the behavior. But I know for a fact that true forgiveness can take place without someone being sorry, because I've done it myself. And it may have been times that you have too. It's possible to do. I can forgive someone whether or not they ever even knew that what they did was wrong. But for true reconciliation to occur and true rectification of a wrongdoing, yes, I agree with Mark. I believe that does require the offending party to express remorse and to dedicate themselves to correcting the behavior. But I can offer forgiveness whether or not someone's going to receive it or consciously receive it, or whether or not someone's even aware that they did something wrong. So those are the things that I think forgiveness is not.
That last one, all those points are phenomenal. But that last one, we see it's really common in relationships, romantic relationships, where one of them is a narcissist.
Oh man.
And just tear the other person, their whole life apart.
Yep.
And because they're in this sociopathic, pathic narcissism personality, they might never ever admit that they were wrong or show any kind of remorse. And that's where your work has to come into play and work that out inside
Absolutely.
you. So yeah, that's a really good point.
If you really want to step into your own power to gain dominion over yourself emotionally, mentally, spiritually, whatever, offer forgiveness to someone who's not sorry. And then you'll see through Gnosis that that's possible, and that you do benefit from it, and you do gain more freedom when you do it.
Yeah.
It also depends on the level of the offense, right? So if someone steals from you or assaults you, that's different. Like you might need to like take retaliation or whatever, depending on the situation, especially if they're continuing doing it. But in personal relationships with people, there are things that you can just let go. It's the old forgive but don't forget. You're always aware that this happened.
Sure.
You don't have to forget that the thing happened. You don't have to hold it against the person, but the next time it happens, if it does, you shouldn't be surprised, right? It's like, so it's it's nuanced, but I agree with you. Like you definitely can forgive someone. I've had the same experience who didn't necessarily want my forgiveness or ask for my forgiveness. I just had to accept the fact that they were this way, and you just have to.
I'll touch a little bit more on what you said on one of the upcoming topics. But yeah, you're exactly right. Depending upon what the wrongdoing was. Right. But yeah, I'll give you a little my nuanced approach to that here down the line.
Yeah. So then, what is forgiveness?
As Will already mentioned, self-respect, self-love. Loving yourself enough to say, I don't deserve to carry around the poison of hatred. The poison of resentment. I can release my emotional attachments to that situation or that person, and then have a clear mind, an objective view of what happened and how to and what my solutions are going to be to it. So self-love and self-respect, It is acceptance of the unchangeability of past events, done correctly. And it's also an invigoration or a dedication to stopping or mitigating present and future occurrences of that wrongdoing. So, when we're truly balancing it, what this whole talk is kind of about, balancing forgiveness with moral accountability, freeing up your creative power, not giving it away to what already has happened, but reclaiming the power and using that creative power to provide solutions, and dedicating your time to stopping or mitigating that occurrence in the future is a big part of forgiveness. Overall, it's just good mental, emotional, and spiritual hygiene. I call it healing or processing in real time. When forgiveness is at our surface, the surface of our consciousness or our awareness, we can start, when things happen, whether it's the tiniest thing or the biggest thing that hurts us, we can start the process as it's happening, right when it's happening, and incorporating this into our practice of evolving our minds and becoming more mentally free. We can start healing and processing things in real time. So that's a big part of it. It's a reclamation of power. It's reclaiming your power. It's becoming the cause of your healing rather than the effect of trauma. Looking at the cause and effect hermetic principle, you rather than to be kicked around by the traumas you've experienced in life and being a victim of that your entire life, being able to forgive is severing the emotional ties, even though you still have the mental ties, because you're not going to forget, but you're severing the emotional tie that kind of keeps you in bondage and keeps you from experiencing your highest levels of freedom that you can. It's sovereignty, it's dominion over self, it's internal monarchy, not allowing the thoughts, emotions, and actions of others to kick around your emotions and dictate how you feel and dictate how you think, how you feel, and how you act. It's establishing more dominion and unifying your thought, emotion, and action, because you're not giving away all your creative energy to the victim mentality or what has happened. It's a potent healing tool in shadow work and inner child work and transmutation, mental transmutation, like you mentioned, John, and alchemy. It's a way to help us transmute our trauma into treasure, and to take turn our shitty experiences in consciousness into higher understanding and evolution. And most importantly, it's a choice. Forgiveness is a choice. It's a free-willed choice, and that's probably the toughest pill for the ego to swallow.
Yeah, it's so easy to play the victim, right? So you have to make that choice. I love how you brought in the alchemical aspect to it, because the physical alchemical process of breaking down a substance and recombining to enhance those elements or that substance. It's the same thing with the mental alchemy as well. And
Right.
and that's an ongoing process. It's a lifelong process. You're constantly going to be doing that. So
Absolutely.
transmutation is a great word for it, for sure. Yeah, those are great points.
Thank you.
So where can we apply forgiveness?
So we can talk a lot about, applying it in shadow work, inner child work, transformational alchemy, or transmutation. I think I'll give some examples from my life that kind of highlight each one. So for inner child work, most of us have had an experience that we can remember when we were a child, and we went running up to an adult that we looked up to, someone that was a role model to us, be it our parents, our uncle, aunt, was big sister, big brother, and we had something we really wanted to tell them about, or ask them about, or something really excited we want to share to them, and then for some reason they just couldn't give us the time of day, or they had some disapproval of some sort, and they didn't really want to hear about it or talk about it. Their level of excitement didn't match our level of excitement. And that's That's considered probably a minor trauma, but it is traumatic because it gets the thought going as that child thinks, why am I not good enough? Or why wasn't that love or excitement reciprocated to me? And this can be applied in a million situations in a million different variations. But one thing that we can go back through doing our inner child work and say, you were loved, that person had their own wounds. They now looking back, they had an ego, whatever was going on at that time probably didn't change the way they truly feel about you. It was their ego in the driver's seat. The ego was at the wheel at that time, and that's why they acted that way. And you're still worthy, you're still good enough, things like that. So that's one way to use it in our inner child work. And this next one kind of applies to inner child work and transformational alchemy and shadow work. I'll use an example from my life. I have sexual trauma from when I was about 5 or 6 years old. And, another thing, I don't know if that person understands they committed the wrongdoing. It was an older kid in my neighborhood. And I don't know if they are sorry. I don't know if they knew they committed the wrongdoing, but I've come to terms with that and been able to forgive that despite what they know or understand. And that's turning a traumatic experience in my life into treasure, because gaining compassion for that person and saying that, never saying that what happened there was okay, but I've been able to offer forgiveness in that situation and reclaim my own power from the situation, and have been able to make real-time solutions that I'm going to educate my daughter as a pediatrician, educate my patients, outreach to people and educate people and give children the proper tools to stop that from happening again or mitigate that from happening again. That's where the psychopath would come out. I can forgive the imperfect person, but try to harm a child on my watch or, in front of me, it's going to be shut down with quickness. That's when my inner psychopath would come out. So I can forgive what has happened to help to just for myself. I didn't offer that forgiveness for that person. I'm not letting them off the hook. That my forgiveness can never change that wrongdoing into a right, into something that was correct or right. But it was a way for me to reclaim my power and to find out, well, how can I make sure that doesn't happen to my daughter, to other children whose lives I'm involved with, and things like that. So that's inner child work, shadow work, and transformational alchemy, all kind of lumped into one, a part of a healing process. And then being able to go and forgive those types of things, it desensitizes you to the experience. So I can go back and claim even more lessons from it when I go into contemplation or meditation and think about those events. The more I'm able to forgive, the more I'm able to take more lessons and more understanding from that experience.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's real quick, I'll interject. It's it's breaking generational traumas too, right? Because you're just taking that baggage. And that's one thing that I just want to say about society in this day and age. We pass traumas, emotional traumas, even physical traumas right on down to our kids. And that cycle just keeps continuing and continuing. Even our ancestors, we're taking trauma from our ancestral lineage sometimes, and it's, if you're not working with those memories, if you're not working with those traumas and healing them, then it's just going to perpetuate.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I should have added that under the different parts of, healing generational trauma through those.
Well, you pretty much touched on it just in more detail. So yeah, I mean, absolutely.
Yeah. So tell us about feminine and masculine elevation through forgiveness.
Well, there's a few. So the feminine and masculine elevation, I look at four different parts. The first two come from the actual deed or committing or actually committing the act of forgiveness, where I'm using I'm enhancing the traits of my feminine aspect of care and compassion nurturing, compassion for myself, eventually even if it takes time, compassion for the offender to heal from whatever wounds drove that offense in the first place. But I'm raising my feminine aspect by invoking my compassion, my care, and my nurturing, at least to myself, loving myself enough to have the desire to forgive. And then I'm raising the will and the actual action, the guardianship and protector status, and the courage of my masculine side to actually commit the deed, to actually offer the forgiveness. So one imbalanced by the other is not going to be effective in nearly anything that we do. So I believe that forgiveness is one of the highest expressions of love, and it requires a great deal of both the feminine and the masculine. It's not just a passive process of wanting to forgive or knowing that I should, but it's an active process and actually requires my masculine to step in and get it done. As opposed to, oh, I love it. I love everyone. I love them anyway, and I don't have to give it any more thought. It really takes some, especially for the more serious traumas in our life, it takes a tremendous amount of both the masculine and the feminine. And then the other two parts of how it can elevate our masculine and feminine is going back through the inner child work or the shadow work and forgiving our mother for all the times she let her ego become our pain or hurt us, and forgiving our other female role models, whether it be teachers, principals, aunts, whatever, forgiving the female role models in our life for the time that they weren't able to show us the love that we needed or be there for us in one way or the other. That helps heal our feminine aspect. And then the same thing for raising the masculine, going back and forgiving our father for the times he let his wounds and his ego become our pain, and our other male role models for the same thing.
Go for it.
So tell us about creating space for others to heal and to come into Gnosis.
And so, we've already touched on this a little bit, but it goes back to our hatred for others or our resentment for others is never going to help them heal. Us being able to detach emotionally from things beyond our control, such as somebody else's thought, emotion, and action, whatever they're thinking, feeling, or doing, being able to detach emotionally from that, whilst being able to objectively and with a steady voice explain, that this is a wrongdoing, it won't happen on my watch, or whatever. Being able to forgive them, even if they don't know you've forgiven them. There's, if you're looking at the quantum mechanic aspect of it, there's like an entanglement when you have a situation with somebody, or if you have any relation with somebody, you develop a correlation, an energetic correlation from them. So forgiving them, even without their knowledge, can help sever or lessen that strong emotional, that strong negative fear-based emotional tie to that person, and very well could help create a space within them to forgive themselves and process and actually rectify their situation. It may not do that, but it absolutely could, and hating them is certainly not going to do it. So that's why I think it's important to forgive, even if a person doesn't know we've forgiven. So that's one way to create the space. And then an even more meaningful and more sure way to create that space for them is to let them know directly. Say, this hurt me, this behavior of yours hurt me, but I'm absolutely forgiving you. This is why I'm forgiving you. And I hope that whatever's responsible for that behavior or whatever, that I'm not perfect either. You're imperfect. You're an imperfect human just like I am. I'm offering you this forgiveness, and it's yours whether you accept it or not. And don't be attached to how they respond. That absolutely creates a space within them to maybe hate themselves a little bit less, and push and bring themselves closer to Gnosis through their own healing journey. If we can truly offer that to somebody and make sure that they know about it, it can help them. I've seen it happen a million times, and that this is Gnosis. It's not a belief. I know that telling someone, I forgive you, and I accept my responsibility for whatever role I played in this situation. It absolutely can help bring them to a place of less self-loathing, and that automatically brings them farther up the spectrum from fear-based vibration to a love-based vibration, and brings them closer to coming into gnosis of both natural law and the thing, and when they committed the true wrongdoing, coming to understand that, forgiving themselves and not hating themselves so much for doing it, and working on righting the situation or correcting the situation.
Yeah, the universe was spoken into existence, so it's so important to vocalize and literally, tell that person, how you just explained it. And key phrase that you were saying was, don't have attachment to the reaction, or
Mm-hmm.
the other person's reaction, for sure.
Absolutely. I've heard someone say, man, I took your advice, Chad. I tried to offer forgiveness to this person in this situation, but it bit me in the ass. And I'm like, well, if it bit you in the ass, it wasn't true forgiveness. You didn't truly make the offering of forgiveness, because you forgave with a condition. You forgave with an expectation, or almost a requirement, that they accept it and apologize and try to make amends and do whatever you were expecting. So it probably wasn't the true energetic deed of forgiveness if it bit you in the ass, because true forgiveness won't, if you overstand objective morality and natural law principles.
Is it
Got
true forgiveness if there's a but?
Yeah, absolutely. It can be and is. If you're, I can forgive any human being for being imperfect, and forgive any imperfect human being for what they have done or committed in the past. But at the same time, I'm overstanding what's objectively right and wrong, and I will never endorse or accept the true wrongdoings or immoral behavior. I can be on your side and want you to heal from and decondition your mind to the point where you stop doing that behavior. But my forgiveness is never going to turn true wrongdoing into a right doing. If someone, punched me in the face when I was a child, whether it was a week later or years later, I can forgive that imperfect human for being imperfect and having a problem, and having an ego take hold and cause harm to someone else. But you punch a child in front of me, it's not going to happen. I'm overstanding moral principles, it's going to get shut down. And the same goes with any type of harm committed. If somebody stole something from me, I can come to forgive that person, but I'll never accept that action. You don't have to accept the action that was done, because there's nothing you can do to make that wrongdoing somebody's right to do it. So yeah, I forgive you, but that action will never take place, whether it's by you or anybody else on my watch again, or if it's taking place within my knowledge, it's not going to happen. So that's where I say, like, yes, you can truly forgive an imperfect human, while saying, but there aren't going to be any wrongdoings or any aggression or violence initiated in any form in my presence or to my knowledge again.
Yeah, that's a powerful disclaimer, for sure.
Right.
It's that old forgive but don't forget.
Absolutely.
Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice,
Right.
You don't fool a fool. Isn't that what
Right.
George Bush said?
Yeah.
Bringing it back to George Bush,
Yeah. Right.
So recap on what this practice does for individual and aggregate freedom and alignment with natural law.
So I'll just make it short and sweet. It is possible to be more forgiving to ourselves and others for our own mental and emotional freedom, while with just as much intensity upholding and standing on first principles in all that we do, and from the generative polarity of love, ever tipping the scales toward order and freedom.
Mm.
Nice.
Excellent. That's great, man. Well said. I can't even comment on that. That's perfect. I do want to say something real quick that we can just touch on briefly, and that is plant medicine. Such a great um, technology to use to activate love and forgiveness inside you. Um, but you still have to do that work. It's not
Yeah.
I went and did 5 ayahuasca ceremonies and bam, all my problems are healed. I'm forgiveness is there and everything, and I'm perfect now. I'm healed completely. That's
Right.
not how it works.
No.
This is a technology that will assist in some level to help you, but you still need to do the actual shadow work and dive and do that mental transmutation. Do you
Yeah,
agree with that?
absolutely. You'll certain plant medicines will temporarily and to some degree permanently dissolve the ego to an extent that we can bring forth the principles of truth that are written in our being, or whatever you want to call it, that can bring forth um, truth within us and allow us to see uh, trauma and suffering and things like that from a different perspective, from a perspective that we need, detached from all the fear. But it is our responsibility, absolutely, and that's where the most important work in it comes, not in what you do while you're under the influence of plant medicine, but what you do in the days, weeks, months, years following. Integrate that understanding into your life.
Hmm.
There's such a culture of, I want to do this or do that just to get high, or to have, to see cool things or this and that, and it's to an extent like a desecration, in my view of what that can really do, and like, I'm not saying that you can't ever enjoy, have a good time or enjoy your experience on any of that, um, but yeah, absolutely. They help you see the truth and the things that need the work that needs to be done, and it's up to you to integrate that experience and commit to the work in real life. Otherwise, you could end up just the same, or even worse than when you started.
Yeah, it's like Mother Nature just kind of, you get the squeegee on the lens of perception so you can see a little clearer, or emptying the trash bin on your desktop, getting some of that bullshit out of the way so you can operate a little bit smoother and still do that work. But yeah, no, that's cool. That's just a personal question I just wanted to touch on, because I see that come up a lot, especially in the new age movements and stuff like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's interesting how that polarity, like those things can be tools for good, but then they can also be abused, and the
absolutely.
culture sort of pushes this idea of just abusing those things, and at this point the culture is pushing people more towards man-made chemicals and
Mhm.
things to
Right.
take for your problems. So
Exactly.
um,
Yeah, the Triforce is what I call it. The Triforce is meditation, um, contemplation or introspection, and
Mhm.
then imagination. The Triforce, for it's like the psychological toolkit that you can keep in there to
Yeah,
help with with dealing just with issues and shadow work.
absolutely.
all right, man. Well, we appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us. Is a very interesting topic. You were saying that you have some plans to turn this into a some type of podcast or something like that.
Yeah, it's going to be a podcast covering a range of topics. Forgiveness we'll try to incorporate that in as much as we can, but kind of along the lines of your all's podcast, and Mark's and everybody else is just trying to get the word out on objective morality, human rights, human freedoms, and how to get there, basically. So it's going to cover all that stuff, and we'll always tie things back into natural law and forgiveness. And we were trying to brainstorm and like hard commit on a name yesterday, but we haven't quite got it yet. So in the meantime, I can be reached if you type Chad Hargrove in on Facebook, or Be Forgiveness, that's one word, my Facebook page to follow or hit me up. or I can always take emails at healingactivism. That's one word, healingactivism@gmail.com.
All right.
Excellent, man. Yeah, that's a great Facebook page. So I highly recommend people check it out. Yeah, Be Forgiveness. That's awesome.
Word. Thank you all so much. I really appreciate you bringing me on and giving me the time. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Chad. Appreciate you, man. Great information.
Yeah,
Yeah, thank you, Chad. It's definitely an important piece to the message we're trying to spread. And I think it's nice the way you presented it. And I'm glad we got to have you on and talk about it here. So
cool.
thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. I appreciate it, gentlemen.
Yeah.
Right on.
All right. Good job, Will.
Take
And
care.
always remember, put something good in the air and plant something good in the earth. Peace.
Gia.